let's look at speed and the calculation of that given a couple of other variables. So we're all aware of speed is a measurement of how fast you are travelling, but that is a comparison of two things. It is distance travelled over the time taken, indicates your speed. And that's represented, so average speeds are represented by S, distance travelled, okay, is D, and time is T. Let's talk about each of these things. So distance travelled is how far you've gone from your starting point to the end of the measurement point, okay? So for example, if you're doing a 100-metre running race, 100 metres is the distance travelled. If you're driving in a car from, say, Melbourne to Ballarat, then it might be 100 kilometres is the distance travelled. The time taken, this literally means how long did it take you to do that. So if you were running 100 metres and it took you 10 seconds, then that would be the time taken. If you were driving from Melbourne to Ballarat and it took you 1 hour, then 1 hour or 60 minutes would be the time taken. So this builds for us this formula here, S equals D over T. Okay, one of the things we have to be able to do with our formula is to be able to manipulate it so that we can solve for other variables. So in this case, for example, we're given speed equals distance over time, okay? And so the use here would be you were given the distance, let's say that distance is, say, 100 kilometres, okay? And let's say that the time it took you to travel from, say, Melbourne to Ballarat might be 60 minutes. And then you'd work out this fraction, and that would give you a speed in kilometres per minute, okay? And that would give you your speed, okay? Now, that's all good and well if you're given the distance and the time, but what if you're trying to work out the time and you're given the speed and the distance? What are you going to do? So in these sorts of scenarios, what we have to be able to do is take this formula of S equals D over T and rewrite it in different forms. So this formula is the one that will be given to you on a formula sheet, okay? But using that, we can then rewrite it two other ways, okay? So what we can do here is we can take the D and put the D out the front of the equation, okay, like here, and we take the S and we move it across. So we can see the distance equals speed multiplied by time. We can manipulate it similarly here, where we can take the T and put it out at the front, and then the S replaces the T, and so the T becomes time equals distance divided by speed. So you'll be given this one, but you need to be able to manipulate it or know how to form it into these other ones in order to solve for these values, depending on the question that you're given. So we have the example of a cyclist who rides 140 kilometres in 5 hours, okay? And we want to find his average speed. So the clue here is that it's asking for average speed. So that means that the S needs to be at the front here and equal to. So speed equals distance over time. So his speed is going to equal distance, which is 140, over the top of the time, which is 5 hours. And that's going to give us 28, and it's kilometres, and it's per hour, okay? Because this is in hours. Now, if it asks you for speed per minute, then you'd need to convert the 5 hours into minutes, okay? So these questions are relatively simple to complete once you identify the correct formula to use. And just like we've done with other formula, if you write the formula and then you substitute the values in, the calculation becomes quite easy to complete. Okay, so here we're given a truck that drives for 15 hours at an average speed of 95 kilometres an hour, and we're asked how far has it gone. So here we want the distance equals speed multiplied by time. Okay, so this is going to then, this then sets us up to do some substitution in. So the speed here is 95 multiplied by the time here, which is 15, okay? And that's going to tell us that this truck driver rather has travelled 1,425 kilometres in that amount of time. Again, identify what you're trying to solve, write the appropriate formula, and then just do the substitution in order to solve that. This is a really classic sort of problem, this one, where we have the walker, the hiker, it'll be a runner, it'll be something like that, and the story will go that they've travelled a certain amount of distance at a certain speed. So here we've got our hiker that's travelled 15 kilometres, they've gone at 4 kilometres per hour, and we're going to say, how long does it take them to complete that? So we're looking for a time, and so it's time and it's distance divided by the speed. So here it's going to be, the time's going to equal the distance, which is going to be 15 kilometres, okay? The speed's going to be 4, and again, we're dealing with the same units here. So we're dealing with kilometres and kilometres, so these two are compatible, and that's going to give us a time of 3.75 hours. Now, clearly at this point, you need to refer back to the question expectations. And is it asking you to give a time in hours and minutes? And if it is, then in this case, it's going to be clearly 3 hours, okay? And it's going to be 0.75 of an hour, okay? So 3/4 of an hour, so it's going to be 45 minutes, okay? As your final answer.